point that I was making before we went on break was that God always meets man where he is. When he was a nomad, God was a nomad. He was right out there with him. And when before that, he came, his voice, we're told, walked in the cool of the evening in the Garden of Eden. That's where Adam was. So that's where God was. He came where Adam was, communicating with him there. And then we see him take up residence in the tabernacle. And we'll look at that in great detail during the next upcoming weeks. In Exodus chapter 40, verse 33, it says, "So Moses finished the work. Then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting because the cloud rested above it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." The last time I taught this class, somebody asked me about the tabernacle of the meeting, and I could not for the life of me remember, but it is the same. It's just another way of saying the tabernacle in the wilderness. But God moved into it, and he demonstrated his presence by a cloud in the daytime, a pillar of cloud, and by night, a pillar of fire. Practical on so many different levels, and we'll talk about that also as we get into it more. And of course, the tabernacle, a temporary dwelling place, remained the residence of God, the dwelling place of God, until God permitted Solomon to build the temple. Then we see God move into Solomon's temple. Eventually, the children of Israel did make it to the promised land, after the first generation died off because of their unbelief. Their kids were able to go in, the kids that they were so worried about being destroyed by the enemies in the promised land, did get to go in, and they became established. They were no longer nomadic. They became a kingdom. In fact, they wanted a king, and they were given a king against God's better judgment. God told them, "You don't need a king. You got me." And they're like, "No, we want a king. Everybody else got a king. We want a king." Billy's got a nickel. I want a nickel, kind of thing. And in fact, it was their second king, King David, who looked around one day and said, "Look, I'm living in this beautiful palace with cedar walls, all cedar paneling and gold ornaments and all this stuff, and God's still living in this tent." That was a pretty nice tent, but he had this great idea. He says, "I think, Lord, you ought to let me just build you a house." And of course, he went to the prophet, and the prophet says, "Oh yeah, just do whatever's in your heart." Well, the Lord kind of hauled him up short, rebuked him a little bit, says, "No, he's a man who's shed blood. He's not going to build my temple." And so, but God did say that He would allow his son Solomon to build a temple, and this temple would be a more permanent dwelling place. It would be, at least to the extent that man would not be able to just load it up on their shoulders and haul it away that easily. It will eventually get destroyed, but God agreed to make the change and move out of the tent and move into the temple. Now, it was some time before Solomon came to the throne. From the time that God promised that Solomon could build a temple, it was some time before he actually came to the throne and was able to build the temple. Now, undoubtedly, David, though, because it was in his heart to do this, started accumulating materials. And one of the things that we'll talk about in detail is the materials that went into building the tabernacle, where they came from, what they were before, what they are now, what they symbolize, what they represent. And so when Solomon did finally come to the throne, there was everything he needed to build a fabulous temple. And on the day that it was to be dedicated, we're told that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not continue ministering because of the cloud. For the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. That's in 1 Kings chapter 8. And so the Lord once again met man where man was. When man was in the garden, God met him in the garden. When man was living in tents, God went with him and lived in a tent. When man became established and lived in more permanent structures, then God moved into a more permanent structure as well. He was in the midst of his people in a house that was not movable from one place to another. He was occupying a place where his people could come, meet with him, worship him. And the temple, as was the tabernacle, was rich. It was beautiful, splendorous. God